So one quick announcement, National Geographic called. They want to have their colors back. The second announcement, and I know this is going to really be painful for most of you here, the fish token offering is off. Really sad. There apparently is already one doing it. We made it up completely, and it turned out to be real. So there's Pitch Token Classic. It will have negative gamma emission rates, infinite block sizes, handled by Corda on top of Quorum, and batched into the fabric. So get involved, guys. All right. So I think at least this side of the room knows me really well. The other side of the room, I apologize, and I really apologize to the translators in the back because I speak really quickly. So this is actually like my 6th presentation in Korea in the last 2 years. I love your guys' country. I love the food. I can't drink much soju, so I settle for water. Anyways, I'm going to try and do something really difficult, which is to talk about a really serious topic in an environment that most of you probably want to have lots of memes. So I did have a couple memes here, but it is a kind of a challenging topic to discuss. So let me dive into that real quick. So quick disclaimer, these are just my own opinions. I am not a lawyer. There are some lawyers. In fact, on our next panel, Sam will be there if you guys want some billable hours. And this only reflects my own opinions. So real quick, let's raise our hands. Who's a lawyer here? Okay, there's like 4 people. Does anyone play a lawyer on TV? That kind of counts. You use the lines. Is anyone a data privacy expert? Wow, okay. So that was, for those of you on video, everyone raised their hands on that one. Who runs their own node at home or on a node on behalf of someone else? So it's all the Ethereum people here. Oh, and then some other guy, I can't see who it is, probably some shill. Okay. And it is building some type of cross-border technology infrastructure. Is anyone doing that right now? Okay, some more Ethereum folks, and then some, I guess, probably some Fabric guys. Okay. So, in less than 280 characters, because everyone's attention span is really short, here's a quick tweet from a guy who runs Azure's business in Microsoft. For years, I've struggled to remember names, conversations, and encounters. I always thought it was because I was forgetful. It turns out I'm just GDPR compliant. If you seriously think the GDPR is going to be revised because of the blockchain, then you're dreaming. Access to one's personal data is as basic as it gets regarding data protection, and the right to be forgotten isn't going anywhere. So I know that, actually raise your hand, who's actually heard of the GDPR before? Okay, so I guess you guys are the Bitcoin folks over there. All right, that's good. So this is a topic, I literally gave a presentation on this topic 18 months ago at an event here in Seoul called Smart Cloud, and I've managed to rework a number of the slides in here. But it's a very germane topic because in 6 weeks it goes live, GDPR itself goes live in Europe. And when I was flying from Beijing over to Seoul on Sunday, I was reading Bloomberg as one does, and I noticed this really interesting quote here from an academic who basically said what I'm about to tell you this whole presentation. Blockchains, surprise, surprise, were not really generally designed to be GDPR compliant. That wasn't the goal. Satoshi's goal wasn't that. Vitalik, was that your goal? He's shaking his head no. So real quick, GDPR, everyone thinks it just impacts the EU or European citizens. It actually impacts anyone doing business online or in some way of electronic communications or data transfers with Europe in general. And it really doesn't matter the size of the entity that's involved. It could be a one-man startup or a nonprofit even. It could be a gigantic megacorp or something like that. So you're all treated exactly the same. And just so we have a little frame of reference, since we're here in Korea, you guys' 13th largest trading partner last year in terms of imports was Germany itself. Germany has some of the strictest data privacy laws. All right, so first meme, here we are. Moses was the first person with the tablet downloading data from the cloud. I'd like to thank Colin for sending me that link. Other older quotes. About 2 years ago, a guy named Brock Pierce said, "The solution to Swiss issue is a blockchain." That is not true. Anyone selling you a blockchain for any kind of security issue, you probably should check them out because it's probably not the first solution. It's usually some intern that stole, private key and revocation access and stuff like that. So, second quote is from an EM white paper about 18 months ago regarding infrastructure as a service. And this is a TBD. We still don't know this because, again, as we talked about on the panel yesterday, people still don't agree on what a blockchain is, so we're going to mention a couple different ones in this presentation, but hopefully a year from now, Deconomy 2019 without National Geographic colors, we will determine what a blockchain is. Everything on a blockchain. Okay, raise your hand. Who wants to put everything on a blockchain? Anthony, of course. And then there's a lady in the back. Okay. So you could probably technically put everything you want onto some kind of blockchain, but it really doesn't make much sense. I mean, we've had plenty of discussions and back and forth debate about what the most effective way is. And so I think that if you guys think that the takeaway message is you should put stuff on blockchains, it's probably not right. So also encryption is not the right method either, probably. But again, that's just my own takeaway. So there are laws prior to GDPR that are scary for those of you that are trying to touch infrastructure. The right to be forgotten. How easy would it be to do a block reorg right now on Bitcoin and Ethereum and do it for a number of blocks so where you actually keep it, you do two different chains? Vitalik, anything off the top of your head? Yeah, if you want to, actually, I'll get back to you. Yeah. Okay, sorry. So yeah, it's only done it like once, basically, unintentionally. Well, intentionally. So it's pretty costly to try and actually delete anything, and that wasn't deleted. You actually have a whole fork in which the mastermind behind the DAO attack actually profited from that somehow. So if you're expecting to put something on a blockchain and be compliant with the right to be forgotten somehow, you need to build in maybe a delete button, and you're not probably going to convince anyone to do EIP or a BIP or anything like that. At least I assume at this stage. This then comes to what laws are data subject to, and this isn't a settled question. In fact, we're seeing lots of court cases around this. So some people think it's subject to the laws in which the subsidiary is in, some in which the data originated, some in which the cloud provider, the actual physical location of where that data actually is stored. There was an interesting quote, and it's still really relevant today. This is from actually about 18 months ago from IO.com regarding sovereignty. Basically, each country has different laws around collection and storage. So it's a fight over who has access to this. We see this actually literally in court right now, Microsoft, and I'll mention that case in a second. I understand you guys have specific laws here in Korea as well. And again, if you have something centrally stored, it's much easier to subpoena and or have a single point of failure, which obviously being distributed is something you guys are trying to get around. This is a quote from Jana Moser. She's a great person to meet. Happy to introduce you to her. I don't get a finder's fee for that at all. But she's a German privacy lawyer, so she really cares about this specific issue. But her I guess message to you guys is when you're building some kind of tech or some kind of policy, make sure it's try to be as forward-thinking as it can, so don't try to be as reactive. Obviously, you have to pay attention to the laws that are already in the books, but going forward, what could you do with your policy? So here's meme number 2. All right. So if you haven't seen Inception, this is a great meme. So we have to inform users when their data is leaked. What does the law say? And then obviously the government or the lawyer Sam is going to say we don't have a privacy law. So that's wrong. Okay. U.S. and EU, since this is an international audience, the EU, the Court of Justice, basically said the safe harbor, which was effectively a data privacy treaty between the EU and the U.S., is no longer valid. They've been renegotiating it. But the important thing here is the Microsoft case. Now raise your hand, who knows what the Microsoft case I'm talking about? There actually is somebody in the back who raised their hand. This is great. So maybe they could walk up and tell it. But as they walk up, let me tell you exactly what it was. There was a customer in Ireland that Microsoft is storing information. I think it was some emails. The U.S. subpoenaed Microsoft saying, hey, you need to hand over this information on this user. And Microsoft fought back saying, hey, this data is actually out of your jurisdiction in a different country. And it's been going on for multiple years. And now the U.S. government, as of last week, said, hey, we no longer want to have this because we've passed something called the Cloud Act, which was in the new omnibus spending bill, which basically changed some stuff. But anyways, extraterritoriality is a big issue to think about. Solutions. So I'm pretty much known in this community for just being a big jerk of challenges. So let me mention a couple of solutions that you potentially do. One of them is you could obviously encrypt data. If it's stored by a third party, though, this creates potential vulnerabilities. Number one, you basically are assuming that that encryption can't be broken right now, but as we know, there's clever people out there figuring out clever ways of breaking stuff. There was an interesting project called distributed.net that would break old hashing algorithms using basically botnet, a voluntary botnet. And then obviously you have problems with legal recourse if somebody else is storing it. What's the legal structure around that in case something is unveiled? Oh, my favorite. Raise your hand. Who knows Carlos? Okay, who's actually met Carlos? Come on. Nobody wants to raise their hand. All right. So if you don't know Carlos, I don't endorse him, but this is the best meme that came out of the whole ICO frenzy, I think. It was with BitConnect. I do not endorse it. They're a complete scam. I will say that on stage. But my encryption. So again, there's a lot of talk about at these events people wanting to be self-sovereign something. You just go on the link, self-sovereign, your identity, self-sovereign bank, self-sovereign taxi cab driver, etc. Here, if you want to maintain your keys, that's cool. But typically, in practice, most people allow some other intermediary to hold it. And what ends up with that, the two problems with that is, as I mentioned, it gives that other institution or intermediary a chance to crack it if they wanted to, and it also enables subpoenas to take place for something similar to that, depending on the jurisdiction. There's also a UX trade-off in the sense that if you have to, if you're doing self-sovereignty identity play and you want to give permission to every application, you're going to spend a lot of time clicking yes or no, and that just creates kind of a frictionful user experience. Opportunities. You can be your own cloud. I don't. Is anyone their own cloud? Nobody? Even the Ethereum folks are their own cloud. Sovereign clouds. Okay, who's ever worked on a sovereign cloud before? Okay, great. That's nobody for those in the video. So sovereign clouds, as the name sounds, are basically data centers built, designed, and managed by these companies like Microsoft. And they're built to specific standards so that way they could actually hold and work with specific applications such as top secret access. So here's a screenshot. Again, I'm not endorsing companies, this is an example. AWS has something, I did not come up with the branding. I'm not sure who the focus group of secret region is. That's something I guess we would say in 5th grade, but I like Amazon, so please work with them, I guess. They announced this last year. They have something called Secret Region, which is very similar to what Microsoft announced with their sovereignty platform. And they claim to have the ability to do up to top secret access, at least in the US. So the way these guys did this, Marley Gray is an employee at Microsoft. And again, I'm not saying AWS did the same thing, but the way Microsoft basically built these sovereign clouds is they bought physical infrastructure, these actual fiber optics that are not commingled with, or do not allow commingling of information. So any data that goes through these that were previously unlit fiber in the ground doesn't touch any of the quote-unquote public internet. So that's one way in which they kind of air gap information. Private clouds. So these were really popular. Like 6 years ago, there used to be something called cloud washing. Has anyone ever heard of cloud washing? I'm sure all of you that worked at startups probably did cloud washing accidentally. It's basically, we have chain washing today. Every company does something with blockchains. Like 6 years ago, everyone did something with clouds, even though you're not very good at it. So BNY Mellon, it's a large bank in the U.S. They had their own, private cloud for customers and counterparties. There's other providers that do that same kind of thing: Oracle, Cisco, the usual suspects. So what does any of the cloud stuff have to do with magic blockchain stuff? Well, I think fundamentally, if we look at where nodes are stored, I mean, raise your hand. Who actually runs a node at home? Anyone? These guys have their private keys. You should steal them. Okay. There's John. He raised his hand. There's other. Okay. So basically, for something like Bitcoin, while everyone says out of principle, I run it out of my own home in Florida, like Luke Jr. or whatever. In practice, most people put something in a cloud somewhere, so someone else actually is running your computer. Even though, technically speaking, it's an anarchic network, there's no terms of service, you actually do have terms of service through your internet provider or cloud provider. permission chains. I mean, we can talk about that kind of stuff all day, but effectively, all these, assuming that you put something in a cloud, you have something KYC, you actually know who runs the validator. So I would say the biggest challenge is, and I've said this multiple times, so I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's intentional that there's no user license agreement. Like if you download Ethereum anything, it's not like you're gonna be able to hold the valid person. Well, actually, I hold you responsible for CryptoKitties. That's, you wear too many cat shirts. Yeah, you intentionally lack contracts into any of these networks, these public networks or public blockchains, I should say, because if you could hold somebody responsible, then it's actually able to, you're actually able to shut it down, and they're supposed to be resilient for that, to that. So obviously I think Alex Batlin would disagree with me on this one, which is fine. But the view is if regulated institutions are trying to handle information that's regulated, or at least if you're a ISP or some kind of infrastructure provider that's trying to handle regulated information, that you may not be interested in using a public chain for one specific reason, which is you're allowing your competitor to have access to information, and/or because maybe the replication of that information is violating laws. So again, talk to Sam. He has good billable rates. Challenges for permission chains. I know that everyone thinks maybe it's much easier in this world of quote-unquote permission to private blockchains. That's not really the case. You still have SLAs. You have to basically manage and support. You also have to make sure that the cloud provider doesn't become monopolistic or some kind of collusion takes place. I'll actually have a whole slide on that one. Let's see. I'll go forward a little bit. The hard part, again, on some of these other chains is breaking the provenance. Now, some of the utility that people have been on panels with yesterday and earlier today were saying, hey, blockchains are great because you can have perfect transparency into things. Well, that is maybe one utility, but at the same time, if you're trying to put PII or personally identifiable information on there, you create this basically chain of provenance, and that could create some legal problems for you, especially with some of these data privacy laws. So everyone's doomed, right? That's usually the takeaway when you listen to me talk. Well, maybe. This is actually some info from a friend of mine, Robert Sams. He's like, yeah, so even if you put validators in multiple clouds, so you're not dependent on one cloud, you still have two issues. One is, if cloud providers know that they're managing, or they have a client who's managing billions of dollars of assets going through their network, and they could find out your name, they're not stupid, then they could potentially extort you. You can become dependent, maybe vendor dependent, and that's not a situation you ever want to be on. And that's irrespective of the blockchain you're actually running. The second one is maybe if you have ever watched some of these exploits that come out, there may be some unknown public or unknown exploit that could be leveraged and take you out, irrespective of which data center you're actually located in. Who sues who? Has anyone ever sued anybody before? Does anyone want to admit that? Okay, there's some. Okay. Oh, you've been sued. Okay. Anybody else? This is the Ethereum folks, huh? All right. Oh, there's someone in the back too. The fact that data is stored in perpetuity kind of creates some problems around purpose of limitation. Sometimes you see if you go to a website saying we only store your information for like a year. If you put something on a blockchain, again, that has the ability to potentially live for a very long time, unless of course you're pitch token, and then that's obviously been forked. Pitch token classic, guys. Also, if you're a conduit of data, it used to be, 5-10 years ago, that if you were simply just allowing electrons to move through your infrastructure, there was nothing that you were really liable for. But as we've seen with with content providers, or I should say content owners, they've begun suing and using DMCA and other types of laws to take down content that are hosted by third parties. So, and then obviously you have the infrastructure like various telecoms in the US that are sometimes responsible for, at least sued for content. So keep in mind that bright line that used to exist no longer does, and it can only become more blurred with blockchains. So key takeaways. I promised memes. So general knowledge is very sorry for your loss. If you don't know SFYL, then you're not following me on Twitter, and that's really disappointing. Also, more SFYL. There is no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. Keep that in mind. If you are thinking that there's an awesome service provider who is not going to break agreements, I hope that that's the case. But we find out time and time again. We even found out Panera had a gigantic but millions of customer records were released. It was 37 million or something like that just a couple days ago that it was disclosed. So again, not to say that all of your data has been confiscated, but I guess if you're at a cryptocurrency event, we assume that you have private keys, and maybe we'll find out one way or the other with kneecaps. Other takeaways. So I think this is my second to last slide. Data privacy issues are not inherently solved because of the usage of blockchains. In fact, the opposite is probably true, especially with blockchains that use a flood or a gossip-like method in which you replicate all information to everybody. And so if you plan to build or maintain some kind of infrastructure like that, I've definitely talked to someone like Sam. I know a number of lawyers in the US too, happy to introduce you to. But scrutinize your platform and see if you're compliant with that. So my last meme, brace yourself, winter's coming for blockchain node operators. Maybe there's a little hyperbole there, but at the same time, if you're touching billions of dollars or trillions of dollars of assets at some point and people know that you're actually running those nodes, be prepared to see some maybe liability come with that. So that's my email address, and I'm happy to chat with you guys offline. So thanks for having me.